Okay, this lesson for the Koine Project class will address the assertion that we trust in Jesus Christ alone, and that's faith alone in Christ alone, and that's because of the grace of God alone. And then, of course, that's according to the scriptures alone, that which is scripted, and that's unto the grace or the glory of God alone. So some think that if you can do that, you'd have to be of some camp or another. Actually, we can just go to our Bible, notice what it means. We know in these texts, for a moment, Acts 20:24, the statement is the gospel. I'll write it up here. The gospel. You remember these two words? This is where we get the word angel, and in this case, it's a message, not the messenger. So we can just break that apart. This is the word correct, as in when we write evangel, the evangel. Now, I've seen certain religious groups actually use that word evangel as part of their name, and it's quite a contradiction, but it does show how far removed they are from the gospel, the correct message that teaches trust Jesus Christ alone for everlasting life. And Jesus Christ himself said, the one who's already believing into him is already having everlasting life. John, the forerunner, said, the one who's already believing into the Son is already having everlasting life, but the one who's negating persuasion by the Son will not see life, but the wrath of the God is already abiding upon him. Now, I'm wording it out according to the Koine and showing you how useful that is. So here we have the correct message of the grace. So, of the grace. And I just mentioned John 3:36 and then John 6:47 that spoke of belief into him. You're already having everlasting life. Now, I won't find, and you won't come across very many or any in your area perhaps, any religion that does not add to trust Jesus Christ for everlasting life. They will do that. They won't acknowledge his finished work, that is the death, his burial, his resurrection. Even in the Gospel of John, he said he would lay down his life, and if he did, he would take it back again. So that's one of the miracles that were included to be persuasive for those who have not believed that he is the Christ. You remember there were those who had trusted Moses and the prophets. Perhaps you were in a service where a preacher was speaking and you heard him preach on Isaiah 53. Well, that was one of the prophets speaking of the suffering servant. Or you were there when Psalm 22 was taught and you knew it spoke of the crucifixion, and you trusted that one who was crucified, and you trusted him for everlasting life because it persuaded you to notice that effect of the cross. So here we have the gospel of the grace, so we're not lacking, and it's the grace of the God. That's the Father of Jesus, of the God. So then 1 Timothy 1:11, Paul said the correct message of the glory of the blessed God. I have to write large, it's easier to see. So now we have the grace. Well, here's faith alone in Christ alone. Now we have the grace, the gospel of the grace. Now we have the glory, the gospel of the glory. You'll notice the gospel is sufficient so that we wouldn't have to go out and find compensatory constructs. A preacher once referenced something called the doctrines of grace, and then he seemed to immediately begin to speak of John Calvin. Now, I don't mean to imply derision or speak diminutively. It's just that it's not even a possibility that you would, one of the effects of the gospel of the grace of the God and the gospel of the glory of the blessed God, the one who in whom and Jesus Christ who came and this fullness of the Godhead was pleased to dwell in him, and he himself said, the one who's already believing into me is already having everlasting life. John the Baptist, John 3:36, the one who is believing into the Son is already having everlasting life, but the one who is negating persuasion by the Son will not see life. So nothing would cause you, again, unless someone told me, again, if I had never had someone cross my path and accuse me of being Calvinist, but what else could they say, since I wasn't among the religions that taught works for salvation any longer? When I came out, for example, in a Free Will Baptist church, you won't find two people that even define free will, and then you won't find one person that will say the same thing twice on how they lose or how they keep their salvation. Assemblies of God, same thing. Churches of Christ, same thing. Now, it's not the people, it's it's like that pyramid. There's a few at the top, the proprietors of these, what we call it, modified messages, these false gospels, as people now clearly and unashamedly say. Well, then Paul said, of the correct message, you notice you can see this now very clearly, of the correct message, of the glory, again, we have glory, of the glory of the Christ now. Notice this, of the Christ. I didn't leave enough room. Who is, and this is icon, like our word today, icon, transliteration. He's icon of the God. Now I remind you here of Hebrews 1:3, for example. In English it says he expressed image. That's this word, character. Or as we would transliterate it today, character. So you'll notice we begin to have this inseparable, somewhat like our understanding of the Trinity explicitly stated in the Bible. So now we see the glory of the blessed God, and now we see the correct message of the glory of the Christ, who is the icon of the God, and we know he's the character, the very expressed image. We also know he's actually the glory of God. He's the personification of the glory of God. Ephesians 2:8 says, the grace, for by the grace are you saved. That refers back, that's a personification of Ho Christos, the Christ in the first chapter. So we don't have an abstract religious definition. And then 1 Corinthians 4:15, he said, in Christ Jesus, you all, Paul talking here, you all. And he said, this is simple, this is just aorist indicative. He says, I fathered you all through the gospel, this correct message. It's great. So here's I myself, Paul being very emphatic. I myself, so in Christ Jesus, he said, in Christ Jesus, I myself fathered you through the correct message. There we go. And so, in this correct message. So here's where we notice, as I said about that word through, it's like the conduit here. So in this conduit through the gospel. And then when you see a phrase born out from God, for example, 1 John 5:1, the one who is already believing that Jesus is Christ has previously been fathered out from the God, fathered out from the God through the gospel of the grace of the God. The grace is that which persuades us. You remember persuasion, pace, mone, equals pistis. Pistis, this is persuasion. This is faith. And you remember in 1 Peter 4:17, he spoke of those who negated persuasion by the gospel. Then John 3:36 said, those who are negating persuasion by the Son. So the Son of God is communicated through the gospel. He's engaged in the gospel. Matthew 28 says, I will be in association with you all until the consummation of the age. And he was speaking of that in association with work of going out and discipling. So I'm not sure what would ever find someone lacking anything that would not be found in the gospel. We have the grace of God. We have faith alone mentioned very clearly in John's gospel, very clearly by Jesus Christ himself and his forerunner. We have the grace of God. We have the glory of God. So we have faith alone. We have Christ alone. He's the only one mentioned to whom the reference is made. It's all according to the scriptures alone. And it's so we have faith alone in Christ alone under the glory, according to the scriptures alone, script. And then, of course, that's unto the glory of God alone. So I'm not sure, and we couldn't have greater evidence, assurance, as it's said in the book of Acts, God's given every man assurance by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So there is nothing lacking in credibility, veracity. So I'm not sure. I have no idea why someone would suggest and associate grace with someone less than Jesus Christ. I think the closest thing John Calvin has to Jesus Christ is his initials. There we go. But I don't know who would even care to mention him unless you probably studied before the Bible, maybe, like I was primed and had pre-understanding. But if a person wanted to study and know that which and through which exclusively they were fathered, and they want to know what was the persuasion, it was the grace of God, who's personified by the Son of God, and people who are negating the persuasion by the gospel are negating the Son, negating persuasion by the Son. So that's really good. Just take we only took 4 scriptures, made references to a few more, and we demonstrated irrefutably the sufficiency of Christ, the sufficiency of the gospel. And we wouldn't have to back up from anyone when we say we have trusted Christ, into Christ, in Jesus Christ alone. So it's faith alone, in Christ alone, because of grace alone. Nothing else would persuade us to trust Jesus for everlasting life except the grace of God and the one of whom the grace of God speaks and the one who personifies it. And that'd be according to the scriptures alone. And that would be under the glory of God alone, which we have that mentioned, the glory of the blessed God, the glory of the Christ. So it's a great lesson. Enjoy it. It's brief, but it's good when you're out witnessing and teaching and encouraging yourself often. So have a blessed day. Enjoy this lesson.